Hello and welcome to O3's AWP Conference Breakout Session, the gold standard in AWP technology, lessons learned from over 300 implementations. Let's meet today's speakers. Today we've got Josh Girvin. He's O3's CEO. He's got many years of CII and AWP experience, ranging from chairing various committees to founding several joint working groups. He's a former SVP of Product and Market Strategy for Materials Management Software and has 12 technology patents.
Sorry, I screwed that up. I didn't know how much you were going to say, so I clicked on. We're going to have to do something different with this. I know we said if we screw it up in the first minute, we'll stop. So.
Hello and welcome to O3's AWP Conference Breakout Session, the gold standard in AWP technology, lessons learned from over 300 implementations. Let's meet today's speakers. First up, we've got Josh Girvin. He's O3 CEO. He's got many years of...
Sorry, Skip. This is stupid. This isn't working.
Hello and welcome to O3's AWP Conference Breakout Session, the gold standard in AWP technology, lessons learned from over 300 implementations. Let's meet today's speakers. First up, we've got Josh Girvin. He's the O3 CEO with many years of CII and AWP experience, ranging from chairing various committees to founding several joint working groups. He's a former SVP of Product and Market Strategy for Materials Management Software and has 12 technology patents. He's also a BSc in Mechanical Engineering from Princeton. Thanks for joining us today, Josh. Then next up, we've got Andrew Foy. He's O3's VP of AWP and Construction Excellence. He has over 16 years of industrial construction with over 6 years in a dedicated AWP role. He's the co-chair of CII Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee and a member of CII AWP CBA Leadership Team. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. So now we'll do a quick safety moment. This one's about falling objects. As people move outside to do some yard work, it's just important to keep in mind if you're going to cut down trees or large bushes, just to stay safe, use proper safety gear. Always keep your area clean and secure, and just keep in mind of all the tools that you may be using as well and all the safety precautions that go with each of those. So just keep that in mind this spring as you go outside. And with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew to begin.
Thank you very much, Tori. So what we're going to be looking at today is trying to give you guys an understanding of how technology can accelerate your AWP success. So first off, we're going to give you a brief overview of who O3 is. We're going to cover digitization versus digitalization and give you a bit of an understanding of the difference between those concepts. We're going to look at advanced work packaging and workplace planning software for construction execution. We're going to cover the return on investment of AWP, and we're going to look at that both with and without software to understand the differences. And then we're going to be running through some owner and EPC success stories. So first up for today, who is O3? Sorry guys, this is just...
Do we just have Josh run through all?
Sorry, this is every time I'm not sure if I've clicked it.
Hello and welcome to O3's AWP Conference Breakout Session, the gold standard in AWP technology, lessons learned from over 300 implementations. Let's meet today's speakers. First up, we've got Josh Girvin. He's O3 CEO with many years of CII and AWP experience, ranging from chairing various committees to founding several joint working groups. He's a former SVP of Product and Market Strategy for a materials management software and has 12 technology patents. He also has a BSc in Mechanical Engineering from Princeton. Thanks for joining us today, Josh. Next up, we've got Andrew Foy. He's O3's VP of AWP and Construction Excellence. He has over 16 years of industrial construction with over 6 years in a dedicated AWP role. He's the co-chair of CII Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee and a member of CII AWP CBA Leadership Team. Thanks for joining us today, Andrew. And now we'll do a quick safety moment before we get started. As spring is upon us, a lot of people are moving outside to do some yard work. So these are just some safety reminders to keep in mind while you're out there, maybe trimming large trees or bushes. You want to always have your area safe, and especially the tools that you're using. You want to make sure you're following instructions, using proper safety gear. You want to keep your area clean and secure. So just some very important things to keep in mind as we are spending more time outside. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew to begin.
Thank you very much, Tori. So firstly, today we're going to be talking about how technology can accelerate your AWP success. So firstly, I'll give you a brief overview of who O3 is. Then we're going to cover digitalization and digitalization, a bit of a tongue twister, and we'll allow Josh will give you an overview on what the difference is between those elements. We're going to talk about advanced work packaging and workplace planning software for construction execution. Then we're going to talk about the return on investment of AWP, and we're going to look at that both with and without technology to see where the differences are. And lastly, we'll close out with some owner and EPC success stories. So first up, let's have a look at who is O3. O3 is a modern web-based platform that leverages advanced work packaging and agile best practices to disrupt the status quo for companies in industrial construction. So the main aim is to improve productivity, safety, quality, and predictability. Typically, O3 operates in the oil and gas space. A lot of our clients are oil and gas companies. We typically work with owner organizations. We work with EPC companies. We're seeing more and more work with contractors now. We work on projects ranging from small brownfield portfolios in single locations, all the way up to massive mega projects in the tens of billions of dollars. We make sure that we have a suitable scalability so that we can cover everything from those small projects all the way up to the large and give a seamless solution to do so. We've worked over 300 projects, and that's part of the reason for the presentation today, is to share some of those lessons learned. We've done a lot of the hard yards. We've learned a lot of those lessons from those implementations. We work with a multitude of contractors, owners, EPC organizations. We're the only solution that provides 10 work package types out of the box, and we've had thousands and thousands of users. So this is a very, very battle-tested solution. It's been out there. It's been proven in the marketplace. In terms of the differences between O3 and some of the other providers in this space, there are legacy providers in this space who have, for example, what we refer to as a thick client, something you have to install on your computer that can manage pipe and steel only, but don't really work with the other disciplines. They have models that work with some model types, but not with others. They do work package management to an extent. So none of these are what we refer to as a SaaS or online web-based platform. We also see the sticker people. We have a legacy solution that has nothing to do with AWP. A sticker gets slapped on it and says, oh, yes, we're hearing that AWP is getting a lot of traction in the market. So yes, now we do AWP. But they're not designed for AWP, whereas O3 was purpose-built precisely for AWP right from the beginning. And the last one, the unproven startups. These are the ones who a website has just been created in the last couple of months. You're looking to be their first trial user. You're being offered a great deal on the product because it hasn't really been tried and tested yet. But don't worry, I'm sure it'll work. That's the kind of messaging that we're seeing from that. Those are the kind of people that are going to be 4 or 5 years at least behind the times in terms of their development and where we're at today. So next, looking at the O3 suite of solutions overall, one of the other key differences between us and some of our competitors is ours is a single integrated solution. This is not a group of disparate elements that we've shoved together and given a name. This is a single solution suite. We've broken it up into various elements here. You can see on plan, which is what we use during the early stages when you're framing AWP for a project, on design that works for engineering, on build is when you're getting into the construction space, and on start for startup and commissioning. And all of these are supported by On Target, which helps with agile project management. But all of these are part of a single coherent software solution. And with that, I'll hand it over to Josh to talk about the digital transformation.
Excellent, thanks, Andrew. So to talk about digital transformation, the first thing we need to do is to cover a couple of terms. And these are, as Andrew pointed out, a bit of a tongue twister. I'll try to get these correct throughout, but the digitization versus digitalization. And those are actually different terms, and it's important to make that distinction. With digitization, that's the process of making information or data available in a digital format. So you can think about taking a paper or manual process and then just moving that into a digital environment. Digitalization, however, is where you actually look at optimizing that process or tweaking that process or adjusting that process to leverage the automation and other efficiency driving components of the technology. So it's not just saying, hey, paper process, let's move that to a digital world. It's saying, hey, in a digital world, what's the ideal process? Let's remove paper. What does right look like? And then build that process. So that's a key distinction. And then digital transformation, that's the process of new business applications, new ideas, new problems being solved now that you can integrate this digitized data and digitalized applications. So if your organization is on a digital transformation, that's what that means from a terminology perspective. And when we think about the state of the digital transformation in the industry as a whole, this is O3's opinion, but really we see the bleeding edge as the folks who were doing this earlier. So this is before 2015. That's where, if some of the super majors had initiatives, corporate-wide initiatives around digital transformations at this time, kind of earlier bleeding edge approach to this. The leading edge was more 2015 to 2020. That's where people realized, hey, we've got to make this transition. In the 2020 to 2025, that's where you see sort of the right on time, or the majority of the folks, the late majority coming in. The pandemic happening during this time also accelerated that state of digital transformation adoption into the longer tail of the market. And then in 2026, people who haven't started this initiative are really the ones who are in jeopardy of getting left behind. So you can think about where your organization is in this journey. This is our opinion about, based off of our work with a number of different organizations and when they started their efforts, kind of how we see the market. Point here is you don't want to be left behind, and so you really need to be thinking about this. When we talk about this digital transformation, obviously you can think about that as an organization as a whole. We're mostly talking about project execution here. So when we talk about the technology stack, we're not talking about all the back office tools and the other things that you see within an organization. We're talking about the technology ecosystem for project execution. So why are we talking about all this digital transformation? Well, it turns out it's actually really important in terms of your AWP journey. And in fact, AWP as a process is enabled by this digitalization. And so it's technically possible to do AWP or workplace planning manually, right? You can do it on a small scale. You can build packages on paper, right? You can take drawings and still you can organize the work better. The advanced work packaging and workplace planning process is a disciplined approach to planning that you can do in a manual world, but you can't do it at scale, and you can't do it. You can't optimize the value. You start to get a little bit more value when you digitize some of that manual process, but the real value comes when you get into that digitalization, which is where you can start to actually enhance or optimize the process. And where you really unlock the value is where you combine this ability to have the planning with the ability to then drive the users to action with workflows and automation, so that you can actually you can increase and drive the productivity on the project. So these digitalized solutions are the foundation upon which better process can be built. So if you think about when I have to make a process change, if I'm doing that in a manual process, that's a lot more difficult than if I'm doing it inside of a digitalized tool where with a configuration change, I can update how an approval workflow works, or how constraints are automatically created or cleared. I can automate that with configuration. Then you get into a whole different world of optimization that's just not possible. It's not realistic or possible in a manual world. So O3 combines that disciplined planning approach with the automation and workflows that drive that users to action and drive the activity on the project. So how do we recommend that this be rolled out? We think of it as a crawl, walk, run. Digital is that first bit, right? So by moving some of these processes into a digital environment, that allows you then to start improving those processes. And when we talk about processes, we're talking about project management here. So we'll go through a number of different project management use cases, but you want to first digitalize those project management use cases, and then you can start to introduce work phase planning, and you can start to introduce advanced work packaging. So you can grow that maturity over time. But really where we see the most success is where people start by getting that digitalization layer in place and having that stand as a foundation upon which you can build these better processes for work phase planning and AWP. This is particularly true when we talk about small cap projects, so a portfolio. One of the things, having rolled out AWP at around the globe on portfolios of small cap projects, we've learned a lot of lessons. And one of the things that we've learned is that it's better to roll out the digitalized layer, that foundation across all the projects, and then select specific projects to roll out increasing amounts of WFP and work phase planning and AWP, so you can incrementally increase the AWP maturity over time. But you want to get the base layer of technology in place across all the projects. And the reason you want to do that is because the resources on these projects are shared across multiple projects. And so if you do a rollout of the technology only to a portion of the projects, then you're asking those project managers and other resources to go to multiple projects, go to multiple tools to manage their multiple projects. So this is a comparison of two different AWP portfolio rollouts. In one of those, we said, okay, let's pick pilot projects and roll out the digital project management tools and the AWP tools and the work phase planning process on a select set of projects, versus rolling out that digitalized layer across all the portfolios. And the outcome of that was that it actually slowed the rollout of work phase planning and the adoption of AWP as a process. That maturity adoption was reduced, versus when we did a digitization layer and then we selected multiple pilot projects and then incrementally increased that AWP maturity over time. That was a much faster path to AWP adoption, because once you get into that, once you have that base digital layer, adding additional process enhancements becomes much easier and quicker, and you're adding value to all of the projects that those resources are managing. As a project manager, I may have 10 projects. I'm getting value across all those projects, and then I'm just over time increasing the level of AWP maturity on my projects. So it's a much smoother way to increase and drive adoption of AWP. So what does that look like? Well, we'll talk about this more, but when you want to digitize some of these core project management steps and actions, things like RFIs, constraints, risks, tasks, approvals, document review process, and then you move into work phase planning, where you can begin to bring in the 3D and 4D models, aligning with the schedule, the status visualizations. You can start doing your packaging and releasing of packages and managing of those packages, and then ultimately expand that out into advanced work packaging to cover the entire project lifecycle, introducing other package types like engineering and design and vendor packages. So what does that really look like? Well, a couple of things that we often see rolled out with O3 is the ability, our Rfi Management Module. This typically on small cap projects replaces email and Excel-based approach. But if you're on large cap projects, you may have resources that have dedicated RFI tools, but then each organization has their own and they don't talk to each other. And so you have this breakdown at the interfaces. So whether you don't have a solution or you have too many solutions that don't talk to each other, what you really need is you need this single consolidated place where all of these actions and tasks are coming together and can be managed and viewed holistically. And RFIs have a lot of steps and workflows and approvals and things that need to be done with those. And whether that RFI originates in O3 or another system, you need somewhere where all that information comes together so you can see that. If you don't have a consolidated list of these activities and actions, you can't have accountability. It's just not possible. So with the Rfi module, you can replace this manual chase up process and you can get this view across all of these actions and activities. Similarly with constraints, and constraints, often people think about installation work package constraints, and certainly that's an area where O3 adds a lot of value, but constraints apply within O3. The constraint module applies to all the different entities, whether that's mechanical equipment or vendor data or purchase orders or requisitions. So there's all these other constraints that O3 can automatically create based off of information in other systems, automatically create within O3 based off of configurations, can be created and managed in O3 by teams during review meetings, all that stuff, having that in one place where it's consolidated gives you that ability to manage it. Same thing with approvals. O3 has the ability to automate the approval process for all this approval routing that's necessary on projects. So now, instead of having some manual process or multiple different systems that I have to worry about, all of these activities and actions, whether they're constraints, approvals, RFIs, whatever they are, I now have one place where all these actions and activities go, and I can view those as a manager. I can understand the state of all of them on the project, and as an individual contributor who has work to do, I can view what I need to do and execute that work. That applies to risks as well. Risks is another area where we often find Excel or very basic tools. And what happens is that risk management is treated as this check the box exercise that you really only look at that during a stage gate review. And at O3, we don't think that's the correct way for risks to be managed. Risks need to be something that's inside this application, that has context, that links to other entities and other components within the project, whether that's to specific contractors or specific scopes of work or specific areas. Having those risks connecting back to these and associated with these other entities within the project management tool, and then the ability to manage the activities associated with those risks, right? If you really want to treat risk management as something that that adds value to your project, you need to take actions to reduce the likelihood of that risk becoming an issue. And then if that risk becomes an issue, you need to take actions to mitigate the impact of that issue. And so that's a lot of activities and tasks and actions that have to be managed. And again, by putting that into this digitalized environment where now I can manage all of those tasks, now I can proactively drive the use of risk management on my project, whereas before it's really generally thought of as just a sort of stage gate check the box exercise on a lot of projects. Another area where we get a lot of value out of the tool is on a document review process. So we have a number of clients who have they use O3 to do the review process of a document, capture annotations so I can add information into that and automatically create constraints or approvals associated with that document. So oftentimes you have document-centric exchange between different organizations on a project that's really inefficient. So I have to send this document over, then I mark it up and send that one back, and I'm separately in my Excel sheet keeping track of actions or comments associated with that. By bringing that into O3, by tightly coupling the ability to review, annotate, create the constraints, the approvals, the actions, the follow-up, the tasks in that system, by having them all in there together, now I've decreased the cycle times of that review process, and I've created those actions and activities and tracking them right there in context of that activity around the document review process itself. So huge efficiency gain associated with that. So then all of these actions then need to be managed, and that's where O3 gives you the ability to leverage different methodologies like Agile, Scrum, Kanban, different ways to organize that information so that you can make sure that you're being very effective in executing those tasks. So it's one thing to be able to create all these tasks and have those tasks go through workflows and have those be routed and those types of things, but then you also need a way to best view and prioritize and execute that work. And so O3 has built into it the ability for you to organize those tasks into team boards, and those tasks can live on multiple team boards. I can have a board that's just my tasks where I organize the information however I want and no one else has that view. I can have a team board associated with a particular team or a particular meeting. So I could have a team board associated with my construction work package release and review meeting. And then whenever I'm going through that meeting, I can capture in real time any tasks or activities and have them associated to that meeting and that process. So it's a really efficient way to organize. So you need to be able to capture and consolidate these tasks, but then you need to be able to organize them for efficient execution. And so O3 does a lot of that, all the automation it can to automatically progress things through the process. But where a human is needed to make some decisions, we also provide these tools to facilitate that human review and prioritization process. And then all that rolls up into a set of reporting and analytics that allow you to keep track of this. So there's a lot of behind the scenes reporting. And the key here is that it allows you to set up filters and manage by exception and jump into tasks or activities based off of things like whether they're past due or they're high priority or whatever it is. I can use my dashboards to automatically surface issues and then drill down and take action. So our approach to the embedded reporting is really about facilitating users to taking that action. So at the end of the day, all this comes together in what we refer to as this single integrated collaboration tool for managing all the actions and workflows across all the project participants. It's crazy to think that we have all these different stakeholders working together to deliver a project, yet we don't have a tool that tracks the status of all actions on the project, right? The best that we have is a Primavera schedule that has a bunch of activities on it, but there's all kinds of actions and subtasks and all kinds of things that actually live down where work gets done. Right, that doesn't, on projects today, if they're not running O3, you don't have this consolidated view of all of these tasks and actions. You don't have this base action layer, which is incredibly inefficient. And O3 provides that base action management layer that goes across all these tools. So whether it's constraints or RFIs or risks or approvals or any other action or task that needs to be done on the project, you have to consolidate that information and have a holistic view of that if you want to have a chance of being able to contain and manage the project. If you don't have a way of containing and managing all the tasks that need to be done, how can you contain and how can you hope to contain or manage the project itself? So that gives you a sense of how we think about this digitalized layer that's the base foundation. And none of the tools that I talked about were specific to work-phase planning or advanced work packaging. So we have clients that use O3 as a digital project management tool that don't do work-phase planning or AWP. They're introducing agile and digital project management into their projects. And then over time, they will introduce work-phase planning and AWP. But the tool itself is provides a lot of value just in that digital project management that gives you that base layer that then allows you to do some really interesting things with process around AWP and WFP and Agile. And so up next, Andrew's going to talk a little bit about how we use that AWP and WFP modules within the tool to optimize construction execution. Andrew?
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that construction has lagged behind a lot of industries in the world in terms of the adoption of technology. I've been on a great many construction sites where the pinnacle of technology was an Excel spreadsheet or a daily report written in Microsoft Word. People are wandering around with a stack of isometrics or a stack of steel drawings. AWP is actually acting as a very, very good vehicle for driving a lot of this technology adoption because it's available, because it's helping, and because the work packaging is greatly enhanced by it. So we'll look at a few of the ways that that can work. First up, with regards to work-phase planning. So anyone who's ever built an IWP will know the amount of pain and effort that goes into doing so if you are doing it manually. You can, as Josh mentioned, build IWPs, you can do work-phase planning manually. It's an incredibly tedious and difficult task. You're going through a stack of drawings, you're trying to find out, where are my materials? Do I have all the drawings IFC? Do I have the correct revisions of everything? What exactly am I working on? What's available? Has the rest of the crew erected the scaffolding? Has the previous work been done? Doing this graphically, for example, in the screenshot you're seeing here, doing this using a sophisticated tool set will make sure that your planners have all of the information they need. They have an excellent basis with using the 3D model that's created by the engineering company and then augmented with additional construction data. All of this information exists. You're producing reports that say where the drawings are at. You're producing reports that say where the materials are at. You have this 3D model. What this software does is sits in the middle of all of that information and pulls it all together in such a way that your planners suddenly have all the information at their fingertips and are able to produce IWPs much faster, much more accurately, and much more efficiently. It makes the whole process in the field so much simpler. In terms of the work package creation themselves, we're looking at a process again that's greatly simplified simply by being able to make it repeatable, configurable, and automated. So for example, I can't count the number of times I've taken an IWP and walked over to another trailer and put it on the safety person's desk or the quality person's desk. Please read this when you get a chance, please sign it. Something as simple as people reviewing this. Where did that one go? Do we know whose desk it's sitting on? I can't remember who's got it. Is it ready to go yet? The ability to collate all of that information in a central location where everybody can immediately access the tool. We don't need to be going to chase people. We don't need to recreate the process every time. We don't need to do every single job re-educating our people on how AWP or work-phase planning is done, because we have a standardized set way of doing it that's supported by the technology that facilitates doing it as efficiently as possible. And it means, quite honestly, without wishing to pick on quality people or safety people, if they're sitting on an approval for 10 days, I can see it. I know who the problem child is. If my planners aren't able to keep up with the demand, I know where my issues are. It gives us a lot more proactive control over our ability to manage work packaging in the field. We're trying to get away from that reactionary mode, which leads us into the next topic with real-time status review. Information, and we're seeing this more and more in the world in general, but certainly in complex construction projects, information is critical. If you do not know what's going on, you will not succeed. Terrifying statistics come out of construction. For example, most projects, the vast majority of projects, do not report a deviation from their plan, from their forecast at completion until they're 70% complete. It's because they don't know. We're sitting there doing projects, we're getting to 70% complete, saying, yeah, we're good, we're going to finish on time, we'll be on budget. And then we have that oops moment where we realize it's not really going well. The granularity of AWP, being able to do everything to that detail, and then being able to augment that with the technology that we're seeing here, giving us these real-time status views. I can click a button and see what material I have available. I can click a button and see graphically, using your data, I can see what drawings are available. There's no point in me packaging something where I don't have the information to support it. I can take the entire model and colorize it to show progress. And believe me, you put that in a big picture on a wall, and that has massive value. You can take a snapshot of it and put it in your weekly report, which will help your senior management stop having to come to site so often, which is always a great thing for the people at site if your senior management don't need to visit so often. So all of these things will greatly augment our ability in the field to own our own destiny. It sounds like a cliche, but if I know where I am and if I know where I'm going and if I can accurately forecast, I can tell you as early as possible how the project is going. Also on the next slide, one of our key announcements recently, we've started with producing something called 4D, which is essentially a time-based playback that allows us to show the progression of IWP installation over time. So for example, if I want to know what am I going to be doing for the next 30 days, what's my 3-week look ahead going to look like? Started to look at SimOps. Have I got people working in the same location at various different heights? Am I going to have welders trying to weld directly above me, pulling cable further down in the rack? So I can use this graphical base and those IWPs that we're creating and sit with the superintendent, sit with that collaborative group of people from all of the different contractors, from all of the different stakeholders, get the permit writers involved and say, we need to be in that space next week. Get all the people who are going to have a say over bringing the materials in and have that information in a very, very simple and easy to consume manner. Have everybody standing there instead of the old-fashioned looking at a whiteboard with a plot plan on it and a bunch of sticky notes or a bunch of magnets on it, which we've done, and it's helpful tool, but something like this will give us a much more detailed view of what's coming at us. So next up, looking at the value of AWP software for construction execution. As I say, the technology is catching up and overtaking where we are. Using technology gets everything in one place. I'm no longer having to chase people. I know there's a single source of truth. It's an expression we use a lot, but it's much, much more powerful when we see all the data in one place and everybody who needs to access it can access it. If you've got vendors providing you with information, you're waiting for fabrication. Where's that spool? Is it here yet? Has it come through the gate? Is my RFID tag starting to flash and tell me that it's come through the gate and it's ready to be loaded up? All of that information can now be consolidated in, and we're not having to replace the way you're currently doing things. We're building on it, we're augmenting it. We're also helping to save time with automation and templates. Instead of every time starting with that blank Excel document or something that somebody created 20 years ago where some of the cells are broken and the formulas don't quite work and you have to fix it every time, you set this up. And once you set it up, it's configurable to the way you want to do things. But once you set it up, there is no further need to go back and revisit it. You just keep marching forward, repeating project by project, area by area. Real-time decisions, real-time information, not waiting for the end of the shift, the end of the week, the end of the month to get some data, not waiting for the contractor to bring you a report saying, oh yeah, actually we were supposed to make 4% this period, but we only actually made 2%, but don't worry, we'll build a recovery plan next week. Having that information and having everybody on the project, all the stakeholders being able to see the same information at the same time. Also leads to our next element, which is supporting accountability. Accountability is critical because unfortunately, there's always a tendency to point fingers. Construction loves to blame engineering, engineering loves to blame construction, everybody in the field blames everybody in the home office. It's a natural state of things. But what this does, for example, things like the constraint management, we can say, here is what this is a need that we have. Here's who has to do it. Here's when it needs to be done. Is it done? Quite frankly, it creates a situation where there's very, very few places to hide. You also gain that visibility quickly. Like we talked about with the granularity, if things start going off the rails, if my first 5 piping IWPs have a terrible performance factor, am I still going to forecast that the rest of my piping is going to finish on time? Or am I going to use those first ones to do that root cause analysis and understand why aren't we making it? What's going wrong? What do we need to fix? I'm not waiting until 50, 60, 70% complete of any discipline or the overall construction to start making changes. And lastly, the collaboration across the companies and disciplines is huge. Construction is not a single company entity. Typically, you're going to have the owners involved, you're going to have the engineering, you're going to have the fabricators, you're going to have a separate company that's doing scaffolds, you might have hired a mechanical contractor, an electrical contractor. All those people exist on the site and they very, very, very rarely exist in isolation. They need to play nicely together. And every project I was ever involved in, everybody started off, yes, this is going to be a great harmonious team. And it's always a great harmonious team until something goes wrong. Having everybody in the same environment and owning the information helps to collaborate and make sure that that one big happy family thing actually gets followed through. So next up, we're going to look at some success stories, and we're going to look at this both from the sense of owners and EPCs. And for the first element of success stories, one of the things that's always an issue for AWP is looking at the cost and the benefit. So we always look at something that we refer to as return on investment as it comes to calculating how well or badly we're going to expect AWP to be able to make an impact on our project. And the tool that you see on the screen calculates the return on investment in 2 ways. Firstly, AWP or workplace planning will have an impact on your project outcomes, and hopefully a beneficial one. And that's one of the things you can use this tool to calculate. But we can also calculate the additional layer on top of that as to the additional benefits that come not just from doing AWP, but from doing it with that digitalization base, with that software approach that's going to allow us to see returns a lot quicker. One of the key elements that we see with an ROI calculation is AWP maturity. And one of the things that's going to take time to develop within your organization is that level of maturity. You don't get the 10% TIC savings on your first project. But one of the things that providing a software product can do is accelerate that path to AWP maturity. It's already got the best practices baked in. We set a standard for how it's to be done. So instead of that really, really slow, sluggish 5 to 10 year approach to getting up to AWP maturity, you can get there much faster. And we can also help to give you an understanding of the return on investment at the various stages of your AWP journey. In terms of the first of our actual case studies, and this is one that Shell has been happy to share in previous conferences, they've done more than 200 projects using AWP. They are one of the thought leaders and owner organizations in this space that's really helping to push this envelope. And they're seeing a lot of really good, for example, they're seeing labor savings, they're getting a lot of improvements in schedule. And it's not just always a question of improving the schedule timeframe, it's also increasing the schedule visibility and viability of those schedules, taking that schedule improvement and feeding it back so they know for the future how this is going to work on future projects and they can hone their forecasts. They're also seeing reduced inefficiency time. Anybody who's ever been on a job site has that galling time where you see a bunch of people standing around with their hands in their pockets. It is almost never because they're lazy. It's because we haven't got a piece of material that they need. They haven't got a crane. They haven't got the equipment. They haven't got something that they need, and they grind to a halt. It's always down to, almost always in my experience, down to something ahead of them that hasn't been produced for them. So Shell is seeing excellent improvements with time on tools, which is one of the key metrics that we see for measuring the success of AWP. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the key things that they see is just that visibility. They know what's coming at them. They can see it sooner, they can see it better, and they can make smarter decisions earlier. On our next success story that we're going to share, this is a mega project that's happening in Asia. And one of the key things with this one is this is a huge, huge project, about $70 billion. One of the things that we always push with O3 is that sense of collaboration within the tool. This one, as you can see from some of the numbers, we've got more than 50 contractors in here. We've got 275,000 constraints cleared. Everybody from all of the various stakeholders is operating within this one tool. Everybody is sharing information. Everybody is working together. There is none of that finger pointing, or certainly much, much reduced, I'm sure, finger pointing aspect of it. Everybody has access to that same information. We're no longer at the point of saying, oh, did I send that to you? I can't remember. Did you email that to me? And where is this thing? It's all right there at your fingertips. So even if you're not doing full AWP, as Josh mentioned, you can still create that base layer of digitalization just in your initial process to be able to create a great amount of enhanced collaboration with using AWP software. And next up, we see some common execution risks for projects. Anybody who's ever sat in a project risk assessment, a lot of these are going to ring very, very true to you. This is going to be things like, we're worried about productivity in the field. Are we going to get our hours per ton of steel? Are we going to get our hours per linear foot or die inch of pipe? So time on tool studies have proven time and time again that using AWP is going to increase that level of productivity in the field. We're taking away roadblocks. The vast majority of what AWP is doing is clearing away rocks in the road that are going to trip you up. If we can do that enhanced collaboration, if we can do our constraint management, if we can identify everything that's going to impact you and take those out of the way, you're going to be much, much more successful. We can also help to maximize off-site work. We can target through that early collaboration and early interaction by bringing construction into the project sooner. How much work can we take off-site? How much can we de-risk the project simply by pulling work away and putting it into an off-site facility? It's often been said that the best hour you spend on site is the one you don't spend on site. And AWP is a great driver to be able to do that because we're pulling that level of construction planning earlier in the process where we can make those decisions and make them intelligently. And on the next slide, what we can see, one of the big issues that AWP has had in the past is a struggle to prove its value. It's always asked, well, how do I know that that was AWP that gave me that success? If I had done this project just the normal way we do it, I might still have got the same results. One of the benefits for us as an organization who's helped oversee and been involved in these hundreds of projects is we can see that repeatable result. In the end, if you do it on one project, it could be a fluke. If you do it on 300 projects and you're always seeing improvements, that's when we can say with every confidence that AWP is helping to make it faster, easier, better. We can do it with fewer planners. We can save you time per week on automation. You don't have those people running back and forth between office trailers wondering where that work package is and whose desk it's sitting on. And critically, you can roll this out with O3 very, very quickly. This doesn't take months and months and months to prepare. Our implementations are measured in weeks, not months. So when we get a call from a client saying, we need to do AWP, we're going to be, well, oftentimes we get calls saying, we're going to site next month. That's no longer a problem. It's something that we can react to. Obviously, the sooner the better, and the earlier in the process is always advantageous. But there's value to be had at whatever stage you are in the process. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh to take you through the key takeaways.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. So a couple of things hopefully you captured from our presentation today. First is the distinction between digitized, digitalized, and digital transformation. So just remember, digitized is a manual process that you've moved into a digital environment. Digitalized is where you start to think about a better process. You enhance the process, you leverage the fact that you're in a digital environment to do the process differently. And digital transformation is when you start to solve new business challenges because you've got digitized and digitalized solutions to build upon. So that's the distinction of those terms. Hopefully that resonates and you can think about where your organization is and kind of your projects and their level of manual versus digitized versus digitalized versus digitally transformed project execution. Another key piece here is that the technology-based foundation, that digitalized technology-based foundation, is what supports a better process. So that's the foundation that enables you to do interesting things on the process side. Once you get the exchange of information and data to have this base layer of being in a system that can manage it in a digital format that can track it. Once you have all of that activity inside of a tool, then you can start to do interesting things. Now you've got all the actions. Now you can change the process through configuration and tweaking. You can say, oh, this needs an approval. Let me turn on an approval there. Or that should create a constraint. Let me turn that on. Now you can start to enhance your process with configuration because you've got that base layer of technology supporting it. AWP is a journey, and these digitalized tools enable that journey. So that process enhancement, that can be an improvement to your RFI process. It can be an improvement to your vendor data review process. It doesn't have to necessarily be an AWP process. That the way you execute a project once you're in this digitalized environment can be enhanced and improved. AWP, work-based planning, and agile methodologies are all examples of process improvements that O3 allows you to configure, allows you to take advantage of. Like I said before, we have folks that use it just as a digitalized project management tool because they haven't gotten to work-based planning or AWP yet. We have other folks that are using it as a digitalized project management tool for agile execution on a project, but not yet work-based planning or AWP. And then obviously we have clients in all areas of the AWP journey, including some of the most mature AWP implementations, or definitely the most AWP mature implementations in the world. When you're thinking about the technology evaluation, you want to make sure you select technologies that play well with others. When we talk about this digitalized environment, the automation that you can get through consuming data from other systems and automatically creating and closing things like constraints or approvals or RFIs, that comes with the ability to exchange data with other tools. And so when you look at what solutions are available, you want to go for modern solutions that have well-developed APIs that support this bidirectional integrations. O3 is a modern application. Our own user interface uses our API, so our API is not an afterthought. We can move all the data in the tool in and out using that. We can also connect with less sophisticated tools with import export. We've got a lot of data management functionality, allows you to configure the ability to consume that data in whatever format those other less sophisticated tools can produce it. And then we can translate, consume, and bring that into O3 using templates that are configurable within the tool. So a lot of support around that as well. That ability to consume and play well with other systems is critical if you want to have this digitalized project execution environment. When you select your technology, you also want to think about driving users to action. This is a core design philosophy at O3. It's one of the giant ones that we have up on the board in our engineering group. And that's because it's one thing to say, hey, I want to have a better planning process, but if you don't actually do anything about it, if you don't get better at executing, if you don't drive people to do stuff, then you don't really realize that value. And so that's where we see that distinction. You can plan better using AWP and work-based planning. You can go through that disciplined planning process, but if you don't then have a tool that drives adherence to an automation around that process, then you really just can't capture all the value associated with AWP. And lastly, O3 is the modern digital project management tool. So it's purpose-built for this space. It enables work-based planning, it enables advanced work packaging, it enables agile project execution, and it does all those process enhancements. It enables all of those on top of this digitalized project management execution layer that has all of the actions and tasks and activities associated with all of the different resources on the project across all disciplines and organizations and stakeholders, where you can have that holistic view and a connection of those things together, because those tasks impact, right? We talked a lot about how you're generally held up because somebody else's work hasn't been, there's a predecessor activity that hasn't been done. Well, within O3, those connections can live there as well. And it's not activity level that you get within a P6 type schedule. The execution happens down here in a much more complex fashion that O3 supports. It's a real-time environment of executing these activities. It's not a scheduling approach. It's a real-time execution and grouping and prioritization of those tasks. That's a critical component to the productivity gain that you get from using the tool. So with that, hopefully you guys learned a few things today. We're gonna reach out over to Tori and see if we have any questions to go over.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a couple here for you, Josh, and Andrew. How do I choose which projects to use work-based planning and which to use advanced work packaging?
Yeah, definitely a very big issue, because historically AWP started, and certainly in the first years, it was considered mega projects only. Only do the big ones. If it doesn't have the word billion in it, AWP doesn't apply. There's been a lot of work and a lot of effort making AWP more scalable to support smaller projects. And as we mentioned right at the beginning, we can use something like O3 down to a small portfolio of brownfield projects all the way up to the new build mega projects. So CII has, and one of the things we're going to be presenting at this conference here in London is a tool that CII has developed called the AWP Selection Criteria tool, which looks at the varying elements of a project in terms of its size, its complexity, its number of interfaces, stakeholders, anything that might inform how useful or how critical AWP is going to be on a project. And even then, you can do it in various stages. So if you've got a tiny project that's one skid, that's going to be one contractor, and not going to impact anything else in your organization, you may not find any value in doing AWP. But even for small projects, anything that's got multiple disciplines, multiple stakeholders, something that has the potential to impact anybody else, you can even do elements of AWP. So you could choose, for example, one group I was working with in Houston, we were doing a small cap portfolio, and all we did was we said every project, regardless of size, must have a path of construction, which we used as a vehicle to get the construction team in sooner, to make sure they had a voice in the room in an earlier stage than they ever used to. And then from there, with the bigger, more complex projects, you can grow that too. We're going to do engineering work packages, construction work packages, and IWPs, for example. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not an absolute yes or no. And that selection criteria tool from CII can certainly help fill in some of those gaps.
All right. Now, one other question. When is the right time in a project to get started planning work packages?
Yeah, so I mean, as the case, when you're talking about advanced work packaging, the short answer to that is the earlier the better. The earlier you get started, the more of the project's activities can be better planned and executed. So AWP enables better planning and execution. So if you started earlier, you can have more of the project better planned and better executed. But that being said, that's FEL2 for projects where we can get in early, and we set up with on plan, which helps set up the project for AWP success. And they use on design during the detailed design phase, where they're managing vendor work packages and design work packages and engineering work packages and procurement work packages. And then you move into on build during construction execution, where you're doing CWP release management, IWP creation and management, test work package management, scaffold package management, and then you move into startup and commissioning, where you get startup work packages and turnover packages. So the depends on the type of package, but typically if you want to do full AWP, you want to get started as early as possible. If you're talking about work phase planning, then you can get involved during the just the construction process, but that's really limits the value. It's still worth it. We still do it. We have clients that say, hey, we started too late on this one, we'll start earlier on the next one, but let's go ahead and do it. And they do see value, but the amount of value, the amount of AWP process enhancement that you can put in place is a function of how early you start. And so the earlier you start, the more AWP and the more value you can get.
Okay, great. Last question. Does AWP technology replace our existing project management tools?
No, No, not at all. And that's not the point. AWP as a process is intended to be, I always refer to it as sort of the spoke in the middle of the wheel. You're going to have all the other elements of it, you know, the cost and the schedule and the quality and the safety, all of that radiating out. But AWP forms that great spoke in the middle. AWP as a system and AWP therefore as technology needs to reside in the middle of the rest of what you're doing. We don't come into any project team and try and throw a grenade in the pond and say you have to replace everything. That level of change management is very, very rarely going to be successful. What we do well is maintain a best-in-class approach. So if you have a scheduling software, keep doing what you're doing. You're not having to retrain all of your schedulers. You're going to look at some adjustments to it, for example, making sure that your schedule reflects your work breakdown structure and aligns to your work packaging structure, but you don't replace the tool you're using for estimating, for materials management, for document management, for your 3D model. We can tie into all of those. And instead of having to duplicate effort and make new things or replace what you're currently doing, the best way we can attack this is to take the information that you're currently using and maximize the value that you can get from it. So we take that 3D model that the engineers create anyway, we add, for example, the fabrication data, and we can suddenly now show you what your fabricated pipe looks like in the model, rather than just having disparate elements and a bunch of, you know, components within the model that don't represent what's going to be in the field. So AWP is kind of the glue that holds the rest of that together and makes the whole process coherent.
All right, well, thank you all both for answering those questions and for some very informative and engaging content from the presentations today. With that, we'd like to thank you for attending our breakout session. And there's a couple ways you can get in touch if you still have other questions or would like to learn more. You can email us info@o3.solutions. Visit our website at www.o3.solutions. And we look forward to chatting with you. You can send us a direct message as well in the feed loop, or we'll hope to see you in person. So thanks again.